And you're probably wondering who I am if you haven't been on this before. I'm Doris Burns. I'm with Gallagher Grace Mayer in Omaha, Nebraska. And we are the insurance broker for Helget Gas and Helget Inc. And we do these hazardous training programs for Helget. This presentation is going to be recorded, so I'm going to start recording it right now. But if you have any questions or whatever, please type in a message. And then at certain points, we're going to unmute you so you can answer some questions. So just so you know, we are going to record this session. So let's get going. First off, I removed a bunch of slides from previous versions because I want to get through it within the 2 hours that we have. But I want you to know that just because you're taking this HazMat training doesn't qualify you to be a HazMat employee for any other company. This HazMat training is specific for Helget Gas and Helget Inc. So understanding the content of this presentation and passing the test at the end of the course qualifies you as a HazMat employee for Helget only. And so if you go to another company, you're going to have to be retrained. So let's talk about part one of this, and this is the overview of the hazardous materials regulations and the training requirements required by that regulation. Overall objectives of today's training is to give you the required training for general awareness, function-specific safety and security awareness. First off, what's a HazMat employee? I hear you're talking about a salesperson. Here at the training, just in case you might have to drive at one point, good for you guys. But a HazMat employee is any person employed by a HazMat employer, i.e. Helget, and who in the course of their employment directly affects hazardous materials transportation safety. So this term includes the owner-operators, the person who develops the shipping papers, the person who loads the HazMat onto your truck, of course you the driver, anybody who has anything to do with the transportation safety of hazardous materials is considered a HazMat employee and must be trained. So I guess I got a little ahead of myself. So anybody who loads, unloads, or handles the HazMat, anybody who manufactures, tests, reconditions, repairs, modifies, marks, or otherwise represents containers, drums, or packaging as qualified for use in transportation, and I know you guys have to requalify your cylinders every so often, so anybody who's involved with that is a HazMat employee. Who prepares HazMat materials for transportation, so the person who fills your cylinders would be a HazMat employee. Is responsible for the safety of transporting hazardous materials, so the person who loads it and secures those cylinders, you the driver, is a HazMat employee. Make sure I didn't. So the hazardous materials regulations divides responsibilities into 3 categories: shipper, that's the person who offers it for shipment; the carrier, the company who provides the vehicle for shipment; and the driver, the person who drives the vehicle. The shipper, just so happens that Helget is all 3 of those, aren't they? So the shipper is a person or company sending HazMat from one place to another. It's the shipper who assigns the proper shipping name, hazard class identification number, make sure it's the correct type of packaging, the correct label, and the markings on placards, and the correct placards. So it's the shipper who provides that. The shipper properly packages the HazMat and prepares the shipping papers and certifies that everything has been prepared in accordance with the HazMat regulations. The carrier transports the shipment to its destination and ensures that the product has been correctly named, labeled, and marked for shipment. So if you're accepting HazMat, you got to make sure that it's correctly labeled. And it's the shipper or the carrier, the carrier who reports any incidents to the proper authority should that occur. The driver, which is most of you folks, ensures that the shipper has properly identified, marked, and labeled the product before it gets put onto your truck. the driver must refuse leaking shipments. It's the driver who attaches the appropriate placard to the vehicle, and it's the driver who keeps the shipping papers in the proper place, which we'll get into later in this presentation. When is HazMat training required? Now, most of you probably have at least I hope, you have a HazMat endorsement on your CDL. But you still have to be trained in HazMat. When you get a new job, they have to initially train you within 90 days of being assigned to a HazMat job. And then you have to be retrained every 3 years. So I think this training today is probably mostly your initial training. There may be some people that need their refresher training, so that's what we're doing today. General awareness. Everybody who's a HazMat employee must be familiar with the requirements of the HazMat training, hazard communication training, and by the way, December 1st, you all should be trained on the new HazCom standard and the new labeling requirements on even on non-HazMat items. So hopefully you're getting your hazard communication training to talk about the new labeling so we can become globally harmonized. And also with the change in the hazard communication standards, there's a change in the material safety data sheets, which are now called just plain safety data sheets. So hopefully you're getting that training as well. So if you're responsible for hazardous materials, you need to know what you're putting on your vehicle or what you're delivering and what to do should something happen. So you need to know what to do in the event of emergency or unplanned release of that hazardous material. Function-specific training, let's say you're just a person who fills out the shipping papers, you need to know how to do that, and we're going to talk about that today. And then safety training. We're going to get into that in a little bit about what to do in the event of an emergency, or excuse me, what to do emergency response-wise if there's a release or an incident. We'll talk about that later as well. And then right after 9/11, the hazardous materials regulations changed. They really swung to be very strict, where every company who shipped hazardous materials had to have a security plan, and now it's kind of, even if you were just shipping soap, you had to have the security plan. So now it's kind of relaxed a little bit, and Helget does not need to have a security plan, but you should be aware of keeping your hazardous materials secure. So you don't want to park your vehicle and go into Burger King and your truck is unlocked and people can go in and get hazardous materials. So your awareness needs to be on the security risks associated with HazMat transportation, methods to enhance the transportation security, and how to recognize and respond to possible security threats. So here's our first question of the day. And let's have Brian and Jack and Mark of St. Louis answer this question. So I'm unmuting you, St. Louis. HazMat training is required how often?
Every 3 years.
Ding, 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 ding. Very good. St. Louis, nice job. Every 3 years. That would have been C on the. So we got through the first one, so really easy. Now I want you all to get out your hazardous materials compliance pocketbook. Again, it may not be this color. It may be some other color. Mine's red, but mine's a July 2012 edition. You may have an earlier or a later version than me. I'm going to try to give you page numbers. My page numbers may not be exactly what yours are, but they'll be close, okay? So you can find what we're looking for as we go through this training. So first thing we're going to talk about is the hazardous materials table. And after this, you're going to know all about the table and all about the Appendix A, Table 1 and Table 2, and also Appendix B. Most of this we're going to, if it doesn't apply to Helget, we're going to go over it very, very quickly because I left a few things in, but I've taken out most everything that does not apply to Helget. so we could get through this a lot faster. And that's why, just because you've had this training doesn't qualify you at any other company. So let's look at the hazardous material table. It is the largest part of your book. It's about half of your book, and it's in the middle of your book. Mine actually has a tab saying HazMat table. The HazMat table, if you just want to, you'll have to turn your book sideways. It lists all the hazardous materials alphabetically in column 2. Alphabetically in column 2. That's how this table works, is by alphabetical in column 2. And what this table does is it gives you all the information that you need for your shipping papers, for marking your packages, for placarding your vehicle, for quantity limitations, to tell you how hazardous something is, to give you your identification number of the chemical you're hauling. This gives you everything you need, this table. So it's a lot of information in one little table. So again, we are up to Omaha now. Where's the second question? I just kind of said it just a little while ago. The hazardous material table lists blank by proper shipping name those materials that the U.S. Department of Transportation has designated hazardous materials by the purpose of transportation. So,
unmuted.
Omaha.
Alphabetically?
Yes. Correct. C, alphabetically. I just
muted.
An easy question, I know, but you got it right. It's listed alphabetically. So let's look at the HazMat table. There's like 3,000 different items in there. The columns that are the most important to you are columns 1 through 5. 1 through 5 are the most important to you because it applies to just about everything you do. So let's look at column number 1. There's the symbols. You can go to any page. Let's say, let's go to oxygen compressed. Mine's on page 241. Yours may be on a little bit different page. Oxygen compressed. Just a little bit above that is oxidizing solid, water reactive, not otherwise specified. And then just a little bit below that is oxygen generator, chemical spent. And in column 1, symbols, you can see that one of them has a G and one of them has a plus sign. So what does that mean? Now if you went right before the HazMat table began, it will tell you everything. So just because you don't remember that after this training, it is in this compliance handbook. It will explain every one of these codes. The plus sign means that you cannot change that proper shipping name. It fixes the name. That's all that means. You cannot change that name. Sometimes you can change a name if you have like a what am I trying to say? If you have a couple of liquids that are mixed together, so you have a mixture, sometimes you can change the proper shipping name, but if it has this plus sign in front of it, you cannot change it. If it has an A in that first column, that means this only applies if you're shipping by air. So in this case, you can see the slide, it says calcium oxide, A. If you're shipping it in your truck, it's not even a hazardous material. It's only if you ship it by air is it a hazardous material. If it has a D, and this is probably going to go away over the next few years, D means domestic transportation. So if you're just shipping it within the United States, it's considered a hazardous material, but if you were shipping it internationally, then it's not. So the D means domestic transportation. G means generic, which means that you have to put something after it. So it's, for example, on this slide it says articles explosive not otherwise specified. You may have to put, then you have to put something else like blasting caps or whatever, the articles of explosive not otherwise specified. So that's a general term, and you have to put a little bit more with it. The I is international transportation, and here on the slide you see the I for international. And look, the hazard class is 2.3 for anhydrous ammonia, but in domestic shipments it's a 2.2, which is a non-flammable gas. So I means international, D means domestic. And again, I think over time you're going to see the D go away as we become more globally harmonized. And the W means this only applies when you're shipping over water, so by vessel. So this doesn't apply to Helgett unless Washington you're using ferries over there to get to some of those beautiful islands you have up there. So again, so this only applies if shipping by vessel. If there's more than one symbol, like here's an A and a W, that means it's both of them, air and water. This applies if you're shipping by air or by water. Now let's go to column 2, which we said was alphabetical by proper shipping name. The proper shipping name may be used either in singular or plural form and is either capital or lowercase letters, but it's in Roman type. It's not italicized. And in your compliance handbook, it's usually bolded as well. So that's the proper shipping name, is what's bolded in your compliance handbook, or is either in all capital letters or in Roman type, not italicized. The italics, on the other hand, are they're not part of the proper shipping name, but can be used in addition to. So in this case, carbon dioxide solid is the proper shipping name, or, which is in italics, you can use the term dry ice. Either one of those will be fine. Again, this is one that's probably going to change over the next few years as we become globally harmonized. Right now in our HazMat book table, toxic is interchangeable with poisonous or poison, but again, that's only in domestic shipments, because internationally those terms actually mean something. So as we go on to become more globally harmonized, you're going to see that probably change as well. Qualifying words, paint-related materials, including paint, thinning, drying, moving. When qualifying words are used, they're optional. Sometimes it would say paint-related material, and then you can actually say what it is. And then the word C. So like in the, they'll say ethyl alcohol. Well, ethyl alcohol is the same as ethanol, but instead of putting both of them in the HazMat table, the HazMat table refers you back to ethanol. You'll probably see the same thing with methyl alcohol and methanol. So when you see the word C in italics, that means you go back to this word here, this proper shipping name. There are some exceptions. I'm going to go through them really quickly. Some have concentration ranges. You must put those concentration ranges on the shipping paper. You don't have to use the word mono before something, because iodine chloride is the same thing as iodine monochloride. If it's me, I'm putting what it says in the HazMat table on my shipping papers and not worrying about it. You sometimes have to specify whether something is liquid or solid. So that is part of the proper shipping name. You don't do hazardous waste, so I'm going to go on. And again, mixtures and solutions. So if it's an acetone, you don't see the plus sign in the column 1. So if I had an acetone with water, I would put acetone mixture, because there's no plus sign in the front. If there's a plus sign there, I just have to put acetone. All right. We are at Washington. And who do we have in Washington? I think Steve, aren't you in Washington? Column 2, that's right. Proper shipping name is located in column 2 of the HazMat. Okay, we have another question. We're at Chicago. Let me see if I can remember who Chicago is. Is that Wayne? Looks like Wayne may be having some problems. Kevin Dowdy's having some problems. James Ronzoni, can you answer this question? Can you hear me? James Ronzoni.
Sorry, I had you on mute there. Let me see.
Oh, okay, very good. James, where are you from again?
I'm from Oregon.
Oh, okay.
Okay, hold on a second. What's the proper shipping name for? Hold on here.
That's okay. Take your time. Again, isooctane, as you can see, is italicized. So it says C octanes. And so what is the proper shipping name for isooctane?
Okay. Hold on a second. Hold on. I would say D.
Well, again, isooctane is in italics. So if something's in italics, it's not a proper shipping name. It has to be in this Roman type, non-italicized. So correct. B-octane is the correct proper shipping name. Very good. Thank you. And Wayne, I got your message that you can't. You're on the phone. You can hear me, but I can't hear you. So when I give you the question, just type it in the chat, okay? So very good. We got another correct answer. Interchangeable abbreviations, just so you know, capital NOS is the same as NOS without periods after it, and it's also the same as lowercase NOS and NOI. So just don't have to worry about that. Now we're into column 3, hazard class or division. Now, you don't have the table that explains all of these numbers. However, in your book, in the back, there are nice, slick, shiny pages with color diagrams and labels and placards. And if you just go to that, you'll be able to determine what these numbers mean. So this is the table you don't have in your compliance pocketbook, but which is in the Code of Federal Regulations, and it tells you that there's a class number, division number, and what the name is. So you guys deal a lot with 2.1, 2.2, so you are probably already know that 2.1 is a flammable gas and 2.2 is a non-flammable compressed gas. But again, if you wanted to look for sure, you can look in the back of your compliance pocketbook, and it'll be back there. If the word forbidden is in there, it means you can't ship it, period. You can't ship it. If it says ORM-D, that means it's other regulated materials, domestic. Again, this classification is only used in domestic shipments, and that will probably go away over the next few years as well. And ORM-D is usually something that's, it may be hazardous, but it's shipped in a smaller container. In interior packaging in smaller containers. For example, Clorox bleach is a hazardous material, but it's a consumer commodity, so they don't make it to be a hazmat required product. And then the definition of flammable liquid and combustible liquid in DOT terms. Even if you're a class 3, which means flammable liquid, that means the flash point of that liquid is 140 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Let's say you put an additive into it, and now it's 145 degree flash point. Now it becomes a combustible liquid. So that's what this slide is telling you. So combustible liquids are between 141 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit flash point, and below 140 or below flash point in DOT terms is considered a flammable liquid. Okay, we are at Wayne. You get to answer this question. Which of these materials may not be offered for transportation or transported unless the material is diluted, stabilized, or incorporated in a device, in addition to being properly classified? Wayne, that's you, and you can type it in. Can I give you a little hint? Let me go. He's looking in his HazMat book as we. Oh, let me help you out here, Wayne. I didn't go into it very much because this doesn't apply to Hauget very much. If it says forbidden, it may not be offered for transportation unless, for example, here's acetylene, liquefied. You cannot unless you do something to it. So what do? We put it into a special container, right? We put it into a compressed gas cylinder, which has honeycomb on the inside of it and stuff, and it's dissolved. So if we just had acetylene liquefied, we couldn't transport it. But because we put it in special containers, now we can. So that's what forbidden. I should have made it been a little bit more clear. So Wayne, good job. So we cannot do acetylene liquefied. Nice job. He got that right. Just so you, I don't know if you guys can see my chat or not, but he got that correct. So. All right. So who are we up to now? We got one more question. Let's see here. Kevin Dowdy, can you hear me? I can't unmute you, so it doesn't. Kevin, why don't you chat me to let me know that you can hear? So we'll let St. Louis answer this question because it's up to them now. Which of these is not identified as other regulated material? St. Louis?
The charges?
Right, the depth charges. And the way they figured that out is you just go down column 3, you see everything's ORMD except for one, and that's the depth charges, numbers, or letter C. Very good. All right, let's go into column number 4. This is the identification number, and you'll notice that some start with an NA and some start with the UN. Over the next few years, I do see that going away, and we'll just become globally harmonized again. NA stands for North America, but it really doesn't stand for that anymore because Canada has gone international, and they use the UN numbers now. So this only applies in the United States now. That's why it's probably going to go away over the next few years. Right before your HazMat table, there's an ID cross-reference. That ID cross-reference, mine starts on page 75. And it's quite a few pages because, again, every chemical that's in the HazMat table that has a UN number, or excuse me, an ID number, in a few years we'll be able to call the UN number. If it has an ID number in it, it's in this cross-reference, so there's quite a few pages to cross-reference from that one number into the HazMat table. Excuse me. This cross-reference is in numerical order, not the NA, then the UN. Just take those 2 letters off. It's in numerical order, that cross-reference. Column 5 is called the packaging group, and it's fairly simple. The lower that packaging group number, the more hazardous something is. So packaging group 1 is very, very hazardous. In fact, you guys don't even ship any packaging group 1 item. Then packaging group 2 is a medium level of danger, and 3 is a minor level. And something like ORMD would be even below a packaging group 3. there are exceptions, and this is what's important for you guys. Compressed gas cylinders do not have a packaging group number because compressed gas cylinders already have requirements of what they need to, how they need to be. So if you're hauling compressed gases, you're not going to see a packaging group. Radioactive is the same. Other medical waste is the same. And ORMD materials will not have a packaging group because, again, they're such a minor hazard, so they're even below a packaging group 3. Otherwise, they wouldn't allow you to ship them as just a consumer commodity if they're really hazardous. Okay, we are up to Omaha. This is your question.
Unmuted.
What packaging group is assigned to the material consumer commodity?
9. C.
Very good. That is correct. Again, it's such a minor hazard, there's no reason to have a packaging group
Muted.
on consumer commodities. All right, on the shipping paper, those columns that we just talked about, columns 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, columns 2 through 5, 2, 3, 4, and 5 must be on the shipping paper. Columns 2, 3, 4, and 5 must be on the shipping paper. They can be in any order, but for me, I'm just putting them in the order that they're on the HazMat table. So 2, 3, 4, and 5 is what the shipping description is of the hazardous material. So column 2, proper shipping name, aluminum powder coated, bam, first thing on their shipping paper. Next thing is the hazard class, column 3, 4.1. Column 4 is the identification number, or I've been calling it UN number, but it's not, it's the identification number. There it is. And then packing group. And again, if you're shipping compressed gas cylinders, you won't have a packing group, so this won't be on there. But if anything that has a packing group, column 5 needs to be in the shipping description of your shipping papers. We're going to go quickly through columns 6 through 10, because in your pocketbook you only go up to column 7. But there are some more columns, so if you're involved in more than just highway shipments, you probably need to get the entire HMR, because there's a lot of information. I mean, it's this pocketbook you have, the DOT regulations, if you're using the same print size, would be probably about 6 to 7 times the width of your compliance pocketbook. There's a lot of information out there, but the pocketbook is more for drivers and for HazMat employees. Column 6 gives you the label codes. The first number will be the primary label, and any numbers after that are subsidiary labels. So I'm going to go ahead and answer this one. Column 6, I just gave you the answer to it. Here we see diallylamine. It has label code 3, 6.1, and 8 in column 6. That means 3 is the primary label, and 6.1 and 8 are subsidiary labels or hazards, and so answer D was correct on that one. Column 7 are special provisions. Where are these located? They're located in your pocketbook. You all can find the HazMat table, right? So if you thumb through the HazMat table and get to the end of it, then you'll get to Appendix A of the HazMat table. And then there'll be Table 1 called Hazardous Substances. We'll get into that a little later. And then right after hazardous substances, you're going to get into radionucleotides. We're not going to do much with that because it doesn't apply to Helget. And then right after that is a list of marine pollutants. And again, we're probably not going to get into, we're not going to go into much of that because you don't ship via water. And then right after that list of marine pollutants, there's a part called Special Provisions. Mine's on page 351. You need to know how to use this part of the book. So let's talk a little bit about it. First off, before we get into these letters, I wanted to find the very first page of the special provisions, 172.102 in your HazMat pocketbook. And it's the first thing that you see are just numeric provisions. There's no alphabet in front of it. Just all they are is numeric provisions. And it goes up to like number 357 if I'm not mistaken. So it goes a long way. So there's 357 special provisions. I think they skipped some numbers in there. And then it goes into the special provisions that start with letters. So numbers come first, and then letters are in numeric order until it gets to the next letter. So I wanted to make sure that you understood that if it's just a number, if there's no letter in front of it, it's just a number, that means that those provisions are multimodal and apply to bulk and non-bulk packaging. So whether you're shipping by air, water, ground, the numbers, pure numbers, apply to your shipment. If it has an A in front of it, it means it only applies if you're shipping by air. So if you're looking at the HazMat table and the special provisions start with A, well, you know it doesn't apply. You don't have to go. You don't have to look it up because it doesn't apply to you. And so this just kind of gives you an overview. Okay, if it has an H, highway shipment, it might apply, so you may have to look up what that special provision means. You don't ship by rail, you don't ship by water, you don't have to worry about it if those letters come up in front of the number. So bulk packaging may apply to you, non-bulk may apply to you, intermodal portable tanks probably not apply to you, portable tanks may apply to you. So it kind of gives you a quick down and dirty whether or not you need to worry about special provisions or not. That's all that's trying to say. So we are up to James. James Ronzoni, you have the next question.
Okay.
What does a special provision code 144 from column 7 mean right here, this 144? This is in general terms. What would that mean?
Hold on a second.
No problem. It's kind of a long question. You're looking up the number, aren't you?
No, I don't even have my book. I don't have.
Oh. Well, that's going to be a hard question for you then. Although I did mention it.
I want to say C.
It's close because that's what you do is you transport by highway, and it's going to apply to you. So that's how you would think, and that's a good way to think. But if it's just a number, it actually applies across the board. So it's multimodal and to both bulk and non-bulk. But I mean, you're thinking right. It's just if you don't have the book, it makes it hard. So all right, very good. Okay, so what's column 8 you do not have in your book, but column 8 has to do with packaging, and this is something that Helget had to worry about when getting cylinders for different types of materials. This is just kind of to give you just a clue of how much more there is to the HazMat regulations than what we're going to talk about today. So here's the HazMat table. This is the full HazMat table that you would have in the Code of Federal Regulations. And here's nitrogen compressed, something you guys ship. You guys know it's a 2.2 compressed gas, non-flammable. Here's the identification number, 1066. Of course, it does not have a packaging group because it's a compressed gas cylinder. The label code 2.2. No special provisions. And now the packaging. Let's look at non-bulk packaging. I actually have a link to 173.302. This has to do with the requirements of the non-bulk package for compressed nitrogen. Hopefully you can read that and see that. There it is, 173.2. Filling of cylinders with non-liquefied compressed gases. So it talks about the general requirements of the cylinder must be offered transportation in accordance with the requirements of this section and 301. So we would have had to go back and read that one. In addition, a DOT specification cylinder must meet the requirements of 173.301A, 302A, and 305 as applicable. So now we got to go read those sections of the Code of Federal Regulations. UN pressure receptacles must meet the requirements of 173.301B and 302B. So if we're going to ship this internationally, we'd have to go read that. So this was just an example of one packaging non-bulk requirement. And yeah, it says 302, but we have to comply with so much of it. So I just want to let you kind of give you an idea of how complicated things are behind the scenes that you don't even get involved with, and how big the Code of Federal Regulations are as it applies to hazardous materials. Column 9, again, not in your pocketbook, is quantity limitations when on aircraft, and they're different for passenger aircraft as they are for cargo aircraft, and rightfully so. You know, if you get a bunch of people on and you're putting a hazardous material on there that leaks, you can have a lot of people sick or injured or even killed. That's what happened with JetBlue down in the Everglades. I think that was in the 90s, where some oxygen generators went off and started a fire, and the plane went down in the Everglades and killed 90-some people. So now you can't do that anymore. Vessel storage, again, if you're shipping something by ship, it tells you where this product, this hazardous material, can be loaded on the ship. And there's a lot of different codes. We're not going to go into them. I just wanted you to know the lower the letter. So A is like the most hazardous substance. And then they also have some numbers. So can it be stored does it have to be stored on the deck? Can it be stored below deck? If there's passengers present, where does it have to be stored? So column 10 does all of that. So there's a lot to hazardous materials regulations. Now, let's talk about hazardous substances really quickly. This is the DOT's way of harmonizing with EPA. EPA already regulates some chemicals, and they use something called a reportable quantity, the EPA does. So the DOT is doing the same thing by having Table 1 to Appendix A, so it's right after the HazMat table. This is called hazardous substances, and these are normally chemicals that are pretty hazardous. So the EPA says if you've got 5,000 pounds of acetone in a single container, this needs now to be listed on your DOT paperwork as an RQ, reportable quantity. Because if that one package starts to leak, you could have a reportable quantity of leakage into the environment, and the EPA would need to be also notified. Radionuclide, just the same way, reportable quantity. You guys don't do it, so I'm just letting you know why that table 2 is there. So to determine if your material is a hazardous substance, first you got to go to table 1, see if it's in there. Table 2, see if it's in there. If it's in table 1 or 2, and it's at the amount in one package of the reportable quantity, then it's a hazardous substance. Then you go to the HazMat table to see if there's a proper shipping name for it, and that's the name you use. If you go to the HazMat table and there's no proper shipping name for it, then you either use environmentally hazardous substance, liquid, or solid, depending on what it is, not otherwise specified. Again, you guys don't do that. Here's an example. This guy's shipping ethylene dichloride. The reportable quantity, according to Table 1, is 100 pounds. Well, he's got his package size is 5,500 pounds. So It's over the reportable quantity. It's listed in the hazardous substances. It's in the HazMat table as ethylene dichloride, so the proper shipping name is ethylene dichloride. And when it gets put on the shipping paper, RQ would be put there. Quickly, you guys don't, this doesn't apply to you, but I just want to let you know that you do have the marine pollutants in Appendix B. And if it has the PP in front of it, that means it is a severe marine pollutant. And that's it for the first part of our session. I'm going to see what time it is here. I tell you what, let's take a 9-minute break, and we'll be back at 11 o'clock Central Time.